It's a great pleasure to be with you all, and I thank everybody who is involved in this beautiful experience of friendship, faith, and also truly hope. And I will just give you some thoughts that came to me throughout these 2 days of conversations with you and listening to the speakers. And what I was finding very important in these many interventions is the importance of grounding ourselves in the faith with the sacraments, with the catechism, just to foster our own faith. Because only when we have the light of Christ shining in our hearts and truly feel his love, we can become a light to others and touch others with his love, not ours. It's his. We are totally dependent upon him. And only when we cultivate that in ourselves, we can be of any use in his work. And I just have to say to John Henry and also to Liz that they both are such beautiful examples, true prayer warriors. And that's why I feel so honored to work with you and everybody at LifeSite, because I think they really live this. Because if we don't do this, we become bitter. And anyone involved with social media witnesses that hatred, bitterness, bickering, that is not leading anywhere, and it's actually giving bad witness. It's repelling people. It's not attractive. It's not beautiful. It's not that people think, I really want to be part of this. This is not how the early Christians converted others. It was by the charity, the glowing love. And so I think LifeSite, John Henry, Liz, everybody, you live it, and you all live it, and that is what we want to foster and encourage. So I'm very grateful for this, to be reminded of this, and also, again, the importance of a good catechism. And I wanted to say it later, but am also grateful to see in the discussions that questions are coming up about the last decades. The way I see it, I see the last decades of the Church's history as being watering down, trying to please the world, of the magisterium, of trying to kind of hide the hard truths. And it has damaged the faith. It has given a weakened witness, like kissing the Quran, or things that snuck into the catechism. And my colleague Haynes has written on the catechism, an analysis. We need to go back to it because that's part of the purification process. We need to come back. How did we get to where we are now? We need to do an honest assessment. And again, even there, we don't need to condemn. We don't need to be harsh, but we just need to look at the truth in charity. The way John Henry always says, we speak the truth in charity. And we shouldn't be afraid, because the truth is truth. And God sends always grace with the truth. He doesn't send grace with an untruth. And it doesn't bear the good fruits. And so we need, out of love for God, to get rid of everything that has covered some of that truth or weakened it. So I'm very, very grateful to hear some of you raising these questions. They are sometimes a little hard questions, but just let's do it, because then our life will be even clearer and more beautiful. And when John Henry asked me to speak, I was a little hesitant because I only lost my husband 2 months ago, and he was much older than I was, and I'm a convert through him. And so I know how this gift of faith is such a precious gift. And I was also blessed. My husband was a traditional Catholic who, like John Henry's father, kept the faith of all ages, suffered for it a lot, was misunderstood and misrepresented. But as John Henry says, these witnesses of these last decades, we have to remember those who did that at a time where it was really hard. I always say when I became a Catholic, Summorum Pontificum, it became a little fashion. I mean, not a big fashion, but it was kind of, the young started flocking. I mean, you can clearly see God's grace is just drawing people back to tradition. They see, it's like with any ideology, there's just nothing sticking. It's shallow, it's empty words. We want to have the real thing. We want to have the real adoration, right? But my husband did not have, this John Venari, or the remnant people, they did it, or Jan Smits is part of that generation too. They did the hard work, where many of you perhaps even looked down on those, and thought they were off to be criticizing a pope, And so we just need to come together, and I think that's what's God's timing in this crisis. He assembles the people of goodwill in the church, and outside. I mean, so many converts coming in, or people open to the faith. So that would be also my point. Let this be a time of grace where we really live charity, because the devil will want us now to be alienating each other and, fighting. So we have the Corona crisis. We had it among ourselves, disagreements, and in the larger movement, or Ukraine, or Israel, and the passions go. It's about life and death, and I always say, let's keep calm and just remember that we are here in this room because we love Jesus Christ and his mother. We are in love with the faith, and we all want to save our souls and the souls of our neighbors, and we want to spend eternity. And the secondary aspects, of course, that are important, I don't want to at all diminish the question of truth, but just let us stay calm and patient with each other, because as we know from our own lives, we progressed in understanding too. Just 5 years ago, we might not have had a certain understanding that we have now. So that person who is right now, in my view, really off, might be 2 years later come around and say, what, I thought about it, and you were actually right, So that would be just a really important point for me to make, that we just take a breath, stay calm. And this actually applies also to the heretics, I believe, not only amongst ourselves. And I owe it to Bishop Schneider, and I think a lot of us do, who really lives that charity toward Pope Francis, who always says, we have to love him, and he says, I've never prayed for any pope as much as I've done for Pope Francis. And he, like Cardinal Müller, and I admire these men for it, they actually have to meet them all the time, right? So I always say, well, I sit at my kitchen table, and just go type my articles, but I never have to actually shake the hand of Pope Francis, yeah? So, but they have to, and they meet, and by keeping that charitable approach, even toward the heretic, they might actually touch some of these lives. And it's very interesting that even now in this papacy, the front lines are very disrupted. There is not a unified Francis camp. And because he's alienating so many with the way he handles, even his friends, he drops them, he abandons them, he mistreats them, that even those former enemies of ours just are actually distancing themselves and might come around. So what I just mean is, if we are too harsh, we are closing doors that God might want us to keep open so that they can come around and start talking. And I just had an example. Again, as I said, I always said, I admire Cardinal Müller. He goes to any big event with Pope Francis and sits right and talks. I don't, yeah? And I always wonder what I would say. Well, sure enough, on the flight to Rome from Munich, I was at the airport, and there was one of the biggest promoters of the heresies of the Amazon Synod. And at the time, it's a priest, and at the time of the Amazon Synod, I analyzed his thinking, I wrote long articles, he was one of my main opponents, and there he sat. And I said, oh my goodness, this is really awkward. But I prayed, and I was trying to imitate Bishop Schneider, because they, as we have it also in this discussion now, deeds speak louder than even words. Like your father, like others, the way they live this charity, you want to imitate it. And so I did walk up to him, and I greeted him, and I presented myself. I'm writing for LifeSiteNews, and I'm actually one of your great critics during the Amazon Synod. And I tried to be a witness. I'm sure I did it very badly, but it is a new dimension to do that step, to go out of our comfort zone and throw coals on their heads, if that's the English expression. I'm German. To just keep the doors open. This is also a soul that has to be saved. And if we radiate something, just ask Our Lady. I don't know what to say, but I hope I did something that might have touched him. I don't know. But just let's try, and God does the rest with Our Lady. But just don't shut and be harsh, and which doesn't mean. My husband used to say, he quoted an old nun, well, in old times, a Catholic had a hard head and a soft heart. Today, modernists have a hard heart and a soft head. So we have to have a hard head about the truths, but we have to have a soft heart. So finally, what I also would like, it's just really, I stand on the shoulders of my husband. I'm just quoting him. What his strength was, he was a literature professor, and all his life he has always read good Catholic literature, and you could always see in him that he fed his faith by the beauty. So we can get so immersed in the ugliness of this world, and we can be so, it's just ugly, it's just, as Jean said, even this hotel, some of it, what we've seen, but we need to feed our soul, as Hilaire Belloc said, our soul needs to be fed with real things. And so good Catholic literature, I want to bring you one example, and actually he did it with me, my husband, Robert Hickson, by the way, is his name. He read his great books that he discovered throughout his life as a Catholic. He would read them at night, first to me and then to our children. One of them is Alessandro Manzoni's I Promessi Sposi, The Betrothed, and since we are in Italy, if you haven't read it, you have to. This is a story of an innocent couple. They want to get married, but she is a very pretty young woman and gets snatched away by a lord of the region who is just really evil. They call him the Unnamed. He has these bravos around him, just really cruel people, and they're just afraid. But Lucy, her name Lucia, turned his heart. She converted him with her purity. So he has her in his castle, and he kind of, wants to approach her, but she's so pure and innocent. And so, again, she is a true witness to him and converts him. And he suddenly realizes his moral ugliness. And he hears that the Cardinal of the region, Cardinal Borromeo, is just visiting the villages. He's visiting his sheep, his flock. And so he takes his bravos and rides into the village. And the scene is amazing. Everybody gets frozen. What is he doing here? And he just asks for an audience. But the beautiful scene is, and this is why I want us all to read it, because it's a conversion scene that inspires our hearts, our faith, and we want to do the same in our lifetime. We want to have that moment where we snatch a soul for Christ, right? And so the Cardinal comes up to him and greets him warmest ways and say, "You shame me, I should have come to you." The man who has destroyed lives, wreaked havoc. And this Cardinal makes himself small and reaches out to him. And so that's what I would like to impart from my husband's life. He said, Catholic literature incarnates for us a faith that is not anymore lived in our societies, but it has been lived. And Catholic literature incorporates this faith and makes it real and lived, and it can inspire us. It leads us to God. My husband called it sacramental literature. Literature that's like a sacramental, used by God to draw us to God. Finally, I also, since we just, Andreas Walzer and I, we just were blessed to interview Cardinal Müller yesterday, and we will soon publish reports on it. But we discussed with Cardinal Müller the synod that has just taken place, and we asked him, how do you explain that the synod's document didn't turn out as bad as we feared it would? There seems to be a little reluctance. And he was thinking about it, and then he said, there was resistance on the floor in the synod, in the coffee breaks, bishops, shaking their heads that there's polygamous relationships, discussed, and I took this away because I've been doing this. But we have been doing this for years now, Amazons and all these, and we just keep fighting and fighting. And some people just say, I'm so tired. Do we need to make another statement? Is it really worth it? And I would say every little bit of it is worth it. Because any pressure we put up, it's going to hold a little longer. And hopefully in God's providence, we hold it just enough until then He intervenes and the dam never really broke. So just encouragement, don't give up. Every little bit is worth. I mean, this synod had a very bad reputation on social media. I mean, this good fight is worth it. It really is. Finally, I would like to mention Christopher Ferrara's speech that was also, I think, really important. I just talked with a priest just in Germany the other day, and he said he wondered whether this consecration of Russia and Ukraine last year wasn't actually killing Fatima, because if that was a valid consecration, it was a joke. I mean, then you just say, well, there wasn't really a true message because it didn't do any. So we did it finally, and it didn't do any. It has no fruits. So let's forget about Fatima. It's okay. It's a dead horse. It's not. So that's why I'm really grateful about Mr. Ferrara's speech. I think it was worthwhile for us to start talking about it again and just to keep saying, no, it's not been fulfilled. Obviously not. Russia would be converted. And so I thank Mr. Ferrara for the speech, and let us not forget to do Our Lady's work. Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us. Thank you so much.